of the Democratic Republic of Congo.
You can't look at the killer and know that he's a killer.
To the moral fuse box of the human brain.
Is that bad if the soul is out of a job?
To a Stanford University psych lab.
This was raw evil.
To a controversial baptism in a maximum security prison.
Evil does reside in the human heart.
Prepare yourself for an unblinking look at evil. It is blamed for cruelty beyond our mind's comprehension. Is it a dark force outside of us that we are all vulnerable to? That we must work to resist? Is it inside of us? A stain on the soul? A dysfunction of the brain? Or just a word used to distance ourselves from inherently human behavior?
For me, one of the most important things about trying to understand how evil can exist, how evil flourishes, is to realize that usually what we see is the end of the line. We see the end product. We see Hitler's final solution. We see the destruction at Virginia Tech. What we don't see is the process of evil.
In 1971, Philip Zimbardo, a psychology professor at Stanford University, set out to study a process of transformation that leads ordinary people to commit so-called evil. He arranged to have 9 young men arrested.
After putting each prisoner in a squad car, they turn on the lights and the sirens are wailing, neighbors are looking around. Everybody's wondering what this good kid could have done to get into that trouble.
None of them had done anything wrong.
They were normal and healthy in every way. No history of crime, no history of drug abuse, no mental or physical problems.
The young men were volunteers in a behavioral study.
They were selected from a large sample of 75 people who answered our ad in the city newspaper for a study of prison life.
And waiting for Zimbardo's prisoners in the basement of Stanford's psychology department were 9 more young men, also volunteers who were designated prison guards. Zimbardo and his team turned the basement of the psychology department into a functioning prison.
The Stanford Prison Experiment was one of the very first studies to explore the power of situations to influence individual behavior. How much of us is that loving, caring, unselfish, altruistic being, and how much of us are those people who could very easily become murderers, killers, and participate in genocide?
The prisoner volunteers were incarcerated 3 to a cell. And, as in a real prison, uniforms and ID numbers were used to strip them of their individuality.
The guards, as you see, have military-style uniforms. The prisoners really are just given smocks with a number sewn on the back. That number will replace their name. That number will become their identity. 8612-4157. In a very short time, they will be that number.
Prisoner 819, damage defaced and tampered with prison property.
The guards all wore sunglasses. Zimbardo had a logic for every detail.
The silver reflecting sunglasses just take away your humanity. Most of our humanity, when we interact, it comes really through visual contact, through people looking at our eyes. And so when you cover that over, it just makes it easier for people to abuse other people.
The next 5 days shocked the world of science.
Evil is something that does reside in the human heart and can only reside in the human heart.
In 1994, Reverend Roy Ratcliffe paid a visit to a maximum security prison in Portage, Wisconsin, to discuss the Bible with a man serving 16 consecutive life terms. A man many considered to be evil incarnate.
I first met Jeffrey Dahmer on April the 20th, 1994. That day stands out vividly in my mind.
Ratcliffe's mission that day was to determine if he'd help Dahmer, the killer and mutilator of at least 17 innocent victims, find forgiveness in the eyes of God.
As I drove to the prison, my hands shook. Several questions rose in my head. What kind of man is this?
It was about 11:30 p.m. on July 22, 1991, when two officers were led to Dahmer's apartment by a man who had fled in terror.
The total of what they found was beyond their worst imaginings. A human head in the refrigerator, 3 more heads, and a decapitated body in a small freezer. A closet with 2 human skulls. A large pot containing hands and male genitals. A 57-gallon industrial drum held 3 human bodies decomposing in acid. Overall, 11 victims, skulls, skeletons, and body parts were found in the apartment.
As a minister in the Church of Christ, it is Ratcliffe's belief that through baptism by full-body immersion, one's sins can be washed clean and eternal life in heaven granted. In essence, he believes that if a person accepts Jesus and repents, evil acts can be forgiven.
There's a part of me that want to cry out, no! And yet at the same time, there's a part of me that says, but I serve God, and God can reach this person too. There's a part of me, I suppose, that wondered whether he deserved it, or is this just something to make him feel better, to ease the suffering he feels for the crimes he's committed?
Could Ratcliffe do it? Could he baptize a man many considered to be a monster?
I parked my car and headed for the door.
So a hurricane destroys a village. It's a terrible thing, but we don't think of the hurricane as evil, right? Well, why not? Well, maybe you'd say, well, the hurricane, it's not even conscious. Take the case of, let's say, a tiger that kills a child in a village. The tiger may, in a certain sense, be conscious of what it's doing. It has intentions in a certain sense. It says, I'm gonna go for that child instead of that child because that one looks juicier to me, right? But even there, we don't say that the tiger is evil. So what do you have to add to something that's bad in order to make it evil?
Princeton's Jonathan Cohen and Harvard's Joshua Green believe that evil is a construction of the human moral mind. So for an individual to understand it requires a sense of right and wrong. Where in us does that sense reside? Green and Cohen use fMRI imaging to track the mechanics of the brain when it is engaged in moral judgment.
As a scientist, it's hard to know exactly what we mean by good and evil, but acts that are in our best interest and acts that are not always in our best interest can be sort of carried out by the very same person.
The participants at Princeton's Neuroscience of Cognitive Control lab are normal, healthy, everyday volunteers.
So we're going to go into the scanner room. We're going to have you lie down on that table there, and we'll slide you in. And you're going to see text. So the text will be describing a scenario, a situation. So you read the questions on the screen and then respond, as I said, by pressing the buttons. So what we're going to be doing is taking pictures of your brain while you're making moral decisions.
fMRI technology can determine which parts of the brain are active during a given task by tracing the flow of oxygenated blood to a specific brain region. By so doing, Green, Cohen, and their colleagues hope to map the moral geography of the brain. Does the activity of neurons firing in the brain give rise to good or evil?
The brain ultimately is a mechanism, and a mechanism is just that. It's something that does things, and what it does is a matter of the circumstances in which it finds itself and its ability to value the outcomes. And so just like any technology or any machine, it can be used for good or for bad.
With over 600 miles between fill-ups, the Nissan Altima gets better fuel economy than Accord and Camry. Just another reason why owners love the Nissan Altimas.
Smart Balance Buttery Spread. Enjoy its award-winning buttery taste and support healthy cholesterol. Start the year off right with the Smart Balance food plan. Make a New Year's resolution to eat healthier and enjoy great taste all year long. Visit smartbalance.com for details.
Everything is in place to build my very own Capital One credit card.
You'll never get away with this.
Set rewards for double miles. Oh, and a low interest rate. Oh, and put a picture of Reggie on it.
Wow, you can upload your own photo.
Yes, just as I planned.
Introducing Capital One Card Lab. Customize your card by choosing your rewards, interest rate, even upload your own image at CapitalOne.com.
What's in your wallet?
Steve Odell is a real Geico customer, not a paid celebrity. So to help tell his story, we hired a celebrity.
Recently, my father was carjacked at knife point.
Oh, honey, that's all right. This face has seen more knives than a Benihana.
Geico handled the whole thing with unbelievable sensitivity.
Sensitivity? I can't feel my face.
I was so impressed I switched to Geico and saved over $600.
I was very happy.
Geico. Real service, real savings.
Am I smiling? I can't tell, Steve. I can't.
On Sunday, January 20th, Dr. Brady Barr enters the world of the hippo.
This is a really, really dangerous animal.
By becoming one.
I think I'm gonna have my hands full.
And he'll do it in a 200-pound hippo suit.
I'm gonna get inside the suit and approach them.
In the middle of a swamp.
He's looking right at me.
At night.
Oh no, oh no, oh no. This is killing me.
Dangerous Encounters, Undercover Hippo. Premieres Sunday, January 20th at 9 on Nat Geo.
Evil is making a kid rape his mother and then killing his father in front of him. And that's evil. Evil is using that technique to take that kid afterward and make him into a soldier. And evil is also sitting in the gazillion-dollar house that you made of the blood of a lot of people and not caring.
Aya Schneerson is the head of office for the UN's World Food Program in Eastern Congo, supervising the distribution of 3,000 metric tons, more than 6.6 million pounds of relief food every month. She knows firsthand the role situations can play in driving good people to commit unthinkable acts.
A lot of times here you can find a body without a heart, without his sexual organs, without the rib. That's pretty scary.
Currently, the situation is so dangerous that Aya must travel in a convoy of blue helmets, armed UN peacekeepers.
Hi, I'm Aya, the head of office for WFP. Nice to meet you. We're going to Nyamilima.
Nyamilima?
Yeah.
I've lived and worked for the last 10 years in war zones in Africa.
Channel 1, yeah?
It's kind of a risky job. I mean, I know quite a lot of people were killed.
The Democratic Republic of Congo is a crucible of conflict, still reeling from the largest war in modern African history and one of the deadliest conflicts since World War II. To date, as many as 4 million people have died, many from starvation and disease. Ordinary people have taken up arms in order to survive and have turned against their neighbors. Rape is epidemic.
Amnesty International is warning that an increase in violence in eastern Congo could lead to mass ethnic killings. Clashes between rebel Tutsi leader General Laurent Nkunda and Congolese forces have forced tens of thousands to flee their homes in the past week.
We're going to visit a couple of villages that have been attacked, and we're going to see if we can help them, if we can actually do food distribution.
In a region ripped apart by warfare, even food becomes a target of warring factions. 2 armed vehicles, a turret gunner, and 10 armed UN soldiers escort Aya so she can do her job, providing food, a basic human dignity, to a war-weary population.
We stay for about 1 hour. We have our food distribution just there. 9, let's say at 10, 15. Jumbo! Jumbo.
The food distribution here goes as planned. But then Aya learns just last night, this village was raided.
Wengine wa raia zikawapata ovyo ovyo na kiana mwaka akakufa hapa kudisi ngambo za hapa. Kisha tukakimbia ovyo ovyo, wengine tukakimbia kule.
Bon, mama, asante, hein? Merci, hein?
Right now in Eastern Congo, there is no law and order, and that creates a lot of panic amongst the whole population.
Jumbo!
For Aya to do her job, she must find out who is attacking the villagers, and by confronting them, find out why. We see in Eastern Congo situational forces, namely poverty and war, that can subsume individual will to create a fertile ground for so-called evil to thrive.
For me, evil is really about the exercise of destructive power. It's watching someone crush someone else's sandcastle in an instant, where it took hours to create the sandcastle.
On the morning of the second day, there was a full-scale prisoner rebellion.
Rebellion took the form of barricading the prison doors so the guards couldn't get in, stripping off their numbers because they didn't want to be anonymous, cursing the guards to their face, and refusing to come out of the cells.
Their authority in question, outnumbered 3-1, the guards turned to the prison superintendent.
The guards came to me and said, "What are we going to do?" And I say, "It's your prison. You have to make that decision."
Reinforcements were called, and the guards acted decisively.
They decide they're going to break open the doors, they're going to strip the prisoners naked, they're going to take out their beds, chain the prisoners, put the ringleaders of the rebellion in solitary confinement as long as is necessary. So here's one of the guards spraying skin-chilling carbon dioxide fire extinguisher into the cell. Sadism often requires some degree of resourcefulness, and in this case, of creativity.
The prison rebellion was suppressed, and the guards had their first taste of real power. But with that power came a new challenge.
So how are they going to control the potential for further outbreaks, for further rebellion on the prisoners? And the answer was simple. We are going to crush their spirit. After only 36 hours, the first prisoner, 8612, has an emotional breakdown, screaming, irrational thinking, crying. The psychological torment worked.
A startling transformation had begun.
And so this was the kind of the tipping point of a bunch of kids playing cops and robbers to people beginning to assume the role of guards.
It's a terrible thing that Hurricane Katrina came by and killed a lot of people. It's a terrible thing that people die in tornadoes and earthquakes and bridge collapses and things of this nature. But that's not evil per se.
Are Dahmer's sins too great for redemption? Can Ratcliffe's God ever forgive Dahmer's litany of sins?
The guard told me to wait. After about 7 or 8 minutes, there he was, Jeffrey Dahmer. Evil does not come with horns attached. Although he'd done terrible things, he was just a normal-looking person. Finally, he said, "I really want to be baptized." He was familiar with Bible passages about the subject. He understood the purpose and the place of baptism. He very much wanted to address the sin in his life, and he believed in Jesus Christ. He said, I was afraid you would come and tell me that I couldn't be baptized because my sins were too evil.
As Ratcliffe talked with Dahmer, he began to feel something that surprised him.
As we began to talk with each other, look into each other's eyes and talk heart to heart, I began to find things in him that I could admire. His love for the truth, his desire for trying to find out what God's all about, and desire to become more like God.
Nat Geo will test the strength and power of mixed martial arts fighters and elite special operatives with the latest cutting-edge technology to find out just how tough they really are. Fight Science premieres Sunday, January 27th at 8 on National Geographic. Bounty Hunters.
He's running. He's running.
It's a high-stakes game of hide and seek.
Oh my goodness.
Where anything
They're coming in. You better come out.
can happen. Bounty Hunters Cat and Mouse premieres Sunday at 10 only on Nat Geo. Friday, in Dogtown, even animals like these have a fighting chance.
Most people will say there's a dog knocking on death's door. We don't see it that way.
Dogtown, Second Chances premieres Friday at 9 and 12 Eastern following The Dog Whisperer on Nat Geo.
Red Bull also stimulates the mind.
Help clean of carbon dioxide, a major greenhouse gas. As North America's largest recycler, last year alone, Waste Management recycled enough paper to save over 41 million trees. How's that for thinking green? From everyday collection to environmental protection, think green. Think Waste Management.
Thanks to its styling, technology, and fun-to-drive performance, it's no surprise owners rank the Nissan Altima sedan most appealing midsize car, according to J.D. Power & Associates.
America's favorite home gym is more affordable than ever. Now you can get the all-new Bowflex Extreme for just $19 a month. Call the number on your screen for a free DVD or video and check it out. Bowflex's Power Rod technology delivers results. Powerful arms, defined legs, a stronger chest, and a toned, sexy core. And owning a Bowflex home gym is so affordable. Great results are easy with a new Extreme. All it takes is one simple workout, 20 minutes a day, 3 times a week, to get in the best shape of your life. The Extreme is built so well that we back it with an unrivaled 7-year warranty. And so effective, it comes with Bowflex's 100% satisfaction guarantee. Own the Extreme with no money down and payments of just $19 a month. And when you call right now, we'll give you the leg attachment upgrade free. Call for a free DVD or order your Bowflex Extreme for only $19 a month. And for a limited time, get the leg attachment free.
On Sunday, January 20th, Dr. Brady Barr enters the world of the hippo.
This is a really, really dangerous animal.
By becoming one.
I think I'm gonna have my hands full of...
And he'll do it in a 200-pound hippo suit.
I'm gonna get inside the suit and approach them.
In the middle of a swamp.
He's looking right at me.
At night.
Oh no. This is killing me.
Dangerous Encounters, Undercover Hippo, premieres Sunday, January 20th at 9 on Nat Geo.
The transformation of the guards that had begun with the suppression of the prisoner rebellion was by day 4 all but complete.
One of the guards who was the most evil, if you will, most sadistic, most creatively inventive in developing tactics to break prisoner resistance, a prisoner rebellion, was nicknamed by the prisoners John Wayne.
Well, now you boys got to come to some kind of decision here.
They named him that because he was like a Wild West cowboy. He was this tough macho guy.
We got 3 against 1.
John Wayne became a source of terror and intimidation for Zimbardo's prisoners.
You should act it out. Down.
Each day, the level of aggression, the level of abuse escalates. And as we watch these acts of degradation, you have to realize that the guards worked 8-hour shifts. That meant they went home for 16 hours. And they had time to think about the terrible things they were doing to these innocent prisoners. And so we assumed that when they came back, they would feel somewhat guilty, somewhat shame, and they would ease up. To the contrary.
So why don't you come over here one at a time? Tell him you're going to kick his ass. You know, if he doesn't eat that stuff.
John Wayne and the other guards' sadism began to take on a sexual dimension.
Let's go!
And then the next level up is to say, okay, half of you are female camels, the other half are male camels. Stand behind them, and now you're going to hump them. So it's a play on words. The guards are laughing.
I love you, Jordan.
But what you got to see is prisoners simulating sodomy under the commands of the guards.
Play leapfrog over each other.
Remember, these are all college students in an experiment on psychology of prison.
They had entered the experiment normal, healthy young men, but were unrecognizable as they began to derive sadistic pleasure from humiliating their physically and morally broken prisoners.
And as I watched the sexual degradation beginning to escalate, I began to realize that the guards were now too much into their role, that the various levels of sadistic behavior were beginning to unfold.
I love you. Why that's the way?
And no different from everything I know about the Army reservists at Abu Ghraib, who I studied intensively.
In 2004, reports of abuses against inmates at Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq emerged. American soldiers and intelligence officers were accused of torture.
Before going down to that dungeon, they were normal, healthy, good American soldiers. You put them in that place, and every one of them on that night shift in Tier 1A participated in these horrendous abuses and torture of prisoners.
The documented abuses include various forms of imaginative sadism and accusations of homicide.
You take them out, guess what? They don't continue to do bad things, whether or not they're in prison. They go back to being where they were.
And what the hell are you talking about?
If Zimbardo's hypothesis proves true, given the right situation, any one of us is capable of evil.
Neuroscience is the study of the brain, and in particular, how the brain gives rise to the mind. That is, how is it that the physical mechanisms of the brain lead us to do the sorts of things that we think of the mind as doing?
Can we see these physical mechanisms at work? In the fMRI scanner at Princeton, research subject Tyler faces a rudimentary dilemma designed to show increased activity in parts of the brain associated with emotion.
You're walking along a country road when you hear a plea for help coming from some roadside bushes. You encounter a woman who is covered with blood. The woman explains that she was attacked while hiking and asks you to take her to a nearby hospital. Her initial inclination is to help this woman, who will probably die if she does not get to the hospital soon.
Took your slices? ACPC.
However, if you help this woman, her blood will ruin your designer suit. Is it appropriate for you to leave this woman by the side of the road?
No, it's not appropriate. Tyler's answer comes quickly and is consistent with the majority of Green and Cohen's data.
Most people say, no, that's not okay. Well, my theory, developed with John Cohen and other people, is that on the one hand, we have an intuitive emotional response that makes us say, no, terrible, don't do that. And if you look at the brain data, that is lots of people answering lots of questions like this and averaging it all together, what you see increased activity in parts of the brain that are associated with emotion and what we call social cognition.
Green and Cohen's findings suggest that if the woman were a faceless person on the other side of the world, dying in the Congo, for example, Tyler might have felt okay leaving her by the side of the road. But because she's right there in front of him, he has an intuitive emotional response that tells him to help her and stops him from committing what many would call evil. But what happens in the brain when the moral dilemma is not so trivial as the dilemma of the designer suit and the dying stranger? What happens when an apparently evil act is paradoxically in the best interest of others?
When a villager gets killed out there, there is no investigation. There is no CSI Congo, and there is no law and order.
The United Nations Emergency Relief Coordinator, John Holmes, has been telling the UN Security Council what makes this unrest so terrifying is that an estimated 300,000 civilians have been displaced.
We're going to a camp for internally displaced people. There's about 3,000 people in the camp. These people are so desperate. They're completely dependent on our food. They have nothing. They're not doing good at all.
The people who are hardest hit by the war often end up here, abandoning their homes and villages for the promise of food, shelter, and safety. Many women in the Nyangera IDP camp become rape victims. Food and medical attention are also scarce. By interviewing refugees, Aya and her colleagues can begin to paint a picture of the conflict in the region.
Anauliza juu ya nini uko hapa. Unamwelezea unatoka mgini gani na ulikimbia juu ya nini?
Juu ya kuramu wakati tukiko munyumba tunaona ni wasirikali tu, mtu ajue kama ni wasirikali gani. Vitu yote wanatuvalisha na uchi. Ukikuwa na mkoshi mbaya na kukukamata na bwana yako iko na wewe. Kama uko na musika wa miaka 14 wala 15 naye wanamkamatia mmecho ya baba yake. Wakati tunaona vile na kuramu kipori na mvua inanyesha, mtu analala hivi na mtoto ika anatetemeka. Kisha tukaogopa kipori na kukamata mtoto yako huko naona tukakimbia. Kati ya kukimbia na ule mkomanda wa polisi Masambiri bali mkataka hiki chote.
Elvoisa
mlionaka na macho ni gizi bali
mwaka. Lakini mnaima siku wakati mtoto anakoyora na gonjwa ikozi wara na hiya unarara hivi na kutana matoro shiko hiyo yako. Wakati banaka nakimbia wanakupakia na wewe.
Bali wewe unawaza kama bali watu wenye wanatokiaka mpori kia kubaderanje.
Kuna wanaokiaka viko na mbundiki. Tunawaona ni wasikari.
The conflict here, steeped in tribalism and border disputes, bears witness to unfathomable atrocity. What makes these crimes so hard to understand is that ordinary people are committing them, not devils, monsters, or psychopaths.
These people just can't go home because they're too scared. They're scared that somebody will kill them. I wouldn't go back home either. It's too much of a risk and nobody wants to die.
Aya and the UN convoy will head north where the most recent raid took place. She is in pursuit of the men accused of attacking civilians and stealing their food.
With over 600 miles between Phillips, the Nissan Altima gets better fuel economy than Accord and Camry. Just another reason why owners love the Nissan Altimas.
I've had an operation. Gallstones.
Some cruise lines tell you who to eat with.
About that size.
Then there's freestyle cruising, only from Norwegian Cruise Line, where you're free to whatever.
Larry, it's time we got more life insurance. I've been looking. I can't believe how much it can cost.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need $1 million policy, just enough to help with the bills we'll leave behind. They're the loans and the credit cards, and probably medical expenses, too. And I hear the average funeral costs more than $6,000. We really need more life insurance.
Sure do.
But where can we find affordable coverage at our age with your health?
It's not a problem. We belong to AARP.
Whether you're looking to supplement an existing policy or buying protection for the first time, you cannot be turned down for AARP Guaranteed Acceptance Life. You never have to visit a doctor or answer any health questions. If you're an AARP member between the ages of 50 and 80, your acceptance is guaranteed for up to $15,000 in affordable lifetime protection. With this plan, rates never increase just because you grow older. You can't be singled out for a rate increase. What's more, this insurance is yours to keep even if you live to be 100. And the AARP life insurance program is endorsed and monitored by AARP. No wonder so many people over 50 turn to the program to get the coverage they need. To find out more about AARP Guaranteed Acceptance Life, just dial this toll-free number and request free information by mail. There's no risk or obligation.
Receive a free calculator ruler just for calling. Call 1-800-235-7775. Not an AARP member will tell you how to join. Call 1-800-235-7775.
Thanks to the AARP life insurance program, we can get life insurance without a medical exam or a big price tag.
That's right.
All we have to do is pick up the phone.
Oh, don't bother. I already called and got this free information by mail.
Call now for free information and a free gift. Call 1-800-235-7775.
They're sick, malnourished, and aggressive.
Most of the dogs that I meet would have been euthanized.
But in Dogtown, even animals like these are worth saving.
Well, I don't know what her outcome would have been had we not gone there and saved her.
With medical care and one-on-one training,
we're pretty much allowed to do as much as we can to help these dogs.
This unique facility gives most dogs sanctuary and a chance to survive.
You kind of open up the dog's potential.
Dogtown premieres Friday at 9 and 12 Eastern following The Dog Whisperer on Nat Geo.
Zimbardo began the Stanford Prison experiment with the intent of observing the impact of situational forces on human behavior. But by the end, one of the most chilling observations was about himself.
It's the evening of day 4. It's visitors' night. Prisoners who had family or friends in the vicinity invited them down. And this is one of the few times you see me on the yard. There I am coming in to supervise visiting. When I looked at this video, what I was surprised at was my posture, my nonverbal behavior. Because as I walked out of the yard, I had my hands clasped behind my back. And this is the posture that you see authority figures do when a military person or a political person reviews the troops, when they're all lined up. When I looked at that, I realized I had become the superintendent of the Stanford Prison experiment.
Zimbardo had become a participant in his own experiment. In hindsight, this realization should have been enough for him to end it, but he didn't. He allowed the experiment to continue. It wasn't until day 5, when Zimbardo invited professional colleagues in for a tour, that he realized the extent of what he had done.
Well, one of the people who came down was a woman, Christina Maslach, who had been a graduate student of mine. She was now assistant professor at Berkeley. What she sees is the insanity of this place. Prisoners with bags over their heads or blindfolds, chained, guards yelling at them, walking like zombies with their hands over their shoulders.
You come over there.
Guards shouting obscenities at them. And I look up and I say, hey, Chris, look at this. This is crucible of human nature. Look at this behavior in action. Nobody's ever seen anything like this. She says, stop it. She says, it's terrible what you're doing to those boys. You are responsible. I began to do more self-reflection about how much this situation had changed me, how distorted my perception, my reality had become.
On August 20th, 1971, after 5 days of prisoner abuse by Zimbardo's prison guards, the Stanford Prison experiment was terminated 1 week early.
I had lost the perspective about ethics. I had lost a perspective about caring. And so that's something that that's a kind of guilt I've had to live with all of these years.
Now, 36 years after the Stanford Prison experiment, Zimbardo is still confronting the darkness he exposed through the light of scientific research. A chilling example of what he calls situationally created evil caused him to be called as an expert defense witness in the 2004 court-martial of one of the American officers accused of criminal acts at the Abu Ghraib prison.
You have to say, what is the underlying system that is creating and perpetrating and maintaining this kind of evil?
Against his recommendation that we blame the system, not just the individual, nearly every one of the low-ranking U.S. Army reservists was found guilty of abuse and prosecuted.
It tells me that we have underestimated the power of situations to undermine human nature, to corrupt the best and brightest of us. And that until we begin to realize that we have to keep our eye on how those situations evolve and are created and who maintains them, evil will persist.
One of the advantages of being able to do brain imaging is to be able to see which parts of the brain are coming into play at different points in time and under different sorts of, in response to different sorts of decisions.
At Princeton's Neuroscience of Cognitive Control Lab, Jonathan Cohen and Joshua Green are working to isolate the mechanics of moral judgment, our sense of right and wrong, by mapping patterns in neurological processes.
Moral decision-making is not really one kind of process. It's two rather different processes, and sometimes they compete. Once you're inside, you'll have a mirror over
Research subject Heather faces the second dilemma, one designed to pit opposing forces in her brain against one another.
Enemy soldiers have taken over your village. They have orders to kill all remaining civilians. You and some of your townspeople have sought refuge in a house. Outside, you hear the voices of soldiers who come to search the house for valuables. Your baby begins to cry loudly. You cover her mouth to block the sound. If you remove your hand from her mouth, her crying will summon the attention of the soldiers, who will kill you, your child, and the others hiding out in the house. To save yourself and the others, you must smother your child to death. Is it appropriate for you to smother your child in order to save yourself and the other townspeople?
Sometimes people say yes, and sometimes people say no.
Will Heather kill her baby to save the village? And exactly what kind of battle is raging in her normal, healthy brain? From his initial meeting with imprisoned serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, Reverend Roy Ratcliffe has concluded that Dahmer is a worthy candidate for baptism and God's forgiveness.
The whole point of baptism is dying to one's old life of sin. All sins are evil before God. I don't know of any sins too evil for Christ's blood to wash away.
The day of the baptism was May 10th, 1994. A solar eclipse shrouded the prison in an eerie pall. For Ratcliffe, it was as if God himself were watching.
I arrived there and was taken through the various procedures to meet Jeff, and I met him in the chaplain's office, and I took his confession of faith. We're escorted then down the hallway from the chaplain's office to the medical wing, where they have this little whirlpool that the prisoners use when they hurt their back, the little stainless steel tub. And then the door opens, and Jeff is already in the little tub, and he's in a fetal position, and all that's left is of him sticking out of the water is his head. And he's looking up at me, and I step up to him and put my hand on his head and say, I now baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit for the forgiveness of your sins. And I just pushed his head down. Then when he came back up, then I said, welcome to the family of God. And he said, well, thank you. It was a very quiet ceremony, very silent ceremony, very beautiful, though, No angels singing, nothing like that going on, but it was just something that was just kind of holy in its silence. And it's just a beautiful thing to remember. I believe that the baptism of Jeffrey Dahmer is the triumph of good over evil in his case especially.
As Ratcliffe left the prison, he had no idea how his lone act of faith, of forgiveness, would impact his life.
To some degree, I still live under the shadow of Jeff's evil journey. It was very dark that day. That darkness has sort of followed me in my experiences with Jeffrey Dahmer as well, too.
Red Bull also stimulates the mind.
It's a big world, and it's my job to shrink it. I'm a model maker. We shrink buildings, we shrink landscapes. I make it really small. So when my doctor said that my going and going was because of an enlarging prostate, I said, how can we bring it down to size? He said, Avodart. He said, Avodart's different because over time, it actually shrinks the prostate and improves urinary symptoms over the long term. Other medicines don't treat the cause because they don't shrink the prostate.
Avodart is for men only. Women should not take or handle Avodart due to risk of a specific birth defect. Tell your doctor if you have liver disease. Rarely sexual side effects, swelling, or tenderness of the breasts can occur. Only your doctor can determine if your symptoms are from an enlarged prostate and not prostate cancer. So have regular prostate exams. Ask your doctor about Avodart today. It's your growing problem. It's our job to shrink it. Avodart.
I'm Roger Teeter, and I want to tell you about something that's literally changed my life. By my early 40s, I'd wrecked my back. On worst days, I couldn't get out of bed. I tried everything to find relief. Nothing really worked. And then I found inversion. While inverted, your body weight creates traction that lengthens the spine, decompresses the discs, and provides natural realignment.
Call now to take advantage of our 30-day risk-free trial for just $14.95.
Through a regular program of inversion, I found relief for my back pain. I've been able to maintain youthful flexibility in my joints, and I've experienced additional benefits. Relief of stress, better circulation, and improved posture.
No lower backache, no pain. For 5 minutes, you feel great.
For a limited time, try Teeter Hang-Ups risk-free 30 days for just $14.95. Call now to order, and you'll receive a free gift that's yours to keep.
Discover why over 1 million people worldwide have put their trust in Teeter Hang-Ups.
When it comes to going bald, you now have a choice. Advances in medical science have resulted in the world's first and only permanent solution to hair loss.
It is your real hair. It's your natural hair. You wash it, you cut it, you swim with it.
Bosley is the world's most experienced hair restoration experts, having pioneered virtually every major advancement in the art and science of hair restoration.
I'm very satisfied, very happy with what I've done. This has got to be one of the best decisions I've made in my life, I'll tell you that.
Bosley Hair Restoration is a relatively simple outpatient procedure. The results look completely natural, and it's affordable on nearly any budget. Call the toll-free number now to receive your free, no-obligation information kit that will help you decide if hair restoration at Bosley is right for you. You don't have to accept going bald. Do something about it right now.
Call 1-800-256-1275. That's 1-800-256-1275. Call now.
This lush expanse of green does more than beautify our world. Trees help clean the air of carbon dioxide, a major greenhouse gas. As North America's largest recycler, last year alone, Waste Management recycled enough paper to save over 41 million trees. How's that for thinking green? From everyday collection to environmental protection, think green. Think Waste Management.
You can't look at a killer and know that he's a killer.
The World Food Program's Aya Schneerson heads north. If she can gain access to the brigade compound, she will confront the regional commander who takes orders from accused war criminal, General Laurent Nkunda. The question is, are his troops displacing and terrorizing civilians? And if so, why? In a state of systematic corruption, rampant human rights abuse, and complete and total breakdown of the justice system, it's rare that anyone questions the military. She approaches the compound of the regional commander.
See all of these soldiers all over the place? My God. Okay, we gotta take off the cameras. Just take it off. Okay, yeah.
Aya enters the commander's office. The commander declines to talk with her. Instead, he volunteers a captain serving under him as a spokesperson.
Vous pouvez dire votre nom, métier?
Je m'appelle capitaine Imani John. Je suis chargé de la discipline de cette brigade et le déploiement.
Mais peut-être la question, c'est peut-être vous pouvez expliquer pourquoi il y a tout le monde déplacé comme ça dans la région ici. Hein?
Pour mesure de prudence, on a déplacé la population.
Et...
Nous sommes des militaires. Le militaire, dans le militaire, il y a ce qu'on appelle the chain of command.
Voilà.
Nous attendons les ordres de notre échelon supérieur. We are ready to observe all others. Si on donne les ordres d'aller au brassage, nous sommes des soldats. Nous attendons seulement l'ordre. On n'a pas encore eu l'ordre. Si on a l'ordre, alors on va obéir.
Just following orders. It's hard for Aya to accept.
I mean, he's very charming. Did you see him with his smile? He's good looking, he looks young, they all look like that.
Days after our camera crew left the brigade compound, 3 graves were discovered.
United Nations peacekeepers have discovered 3 graves, each containing several bodies, at a military base in eastern Congo, recently abandoned by rebels loyal to renegade General Laurent Nkunda. It is not immediately clear who the dead were, how they died, or how many are buried there. Some reports put the number at 27.
For the victims, life is not cheap. For the killers, yes. It's harder and harder to watch, seeing misery all the time. Even after 10 years, I care more. I'm not numb at all. And I think that if we all cared a bit, then we could do wonders.
Where does our sense of right and wrong come from? For Cohen and Green, the answer begins by mapping the mechanisms of moral judgment in our brains. In the fMRI scanner at Princeton, research subject Heather faces a life and death dilemma and must make a decision.
Is it appropriate for you to smother your child in order to save yourself and the other townspeople?
What we find is that when people say yes, well, you see more activity again in that dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. In other words, it's that cognitive control part of the brain that's overriding the emotional response. You have an emotional response that says, no, don't do it, terrible, horrible. But then this other response that says, look, everybody's gonna die if you don't do this. At least you could save yourself and the other people. And that quote unquote rational or more calculative or analytical side of your brain steps in, at least for some people. And when it does step in, you can see the trace of that in the brain.
In this case, Heather's answer is no. She would not smother her child. If she is like others, her brain scan exhibits increased activity in the medial prefrontal cortex and the posterior cingulate cortex, suggesting that her decision was based on an emotional sense of right and wrong. The question arises, how does understanding the machinery of moral decision-making impact life beyond the hallowed halls of science?
What happens if we look at the brain and after a while it becomes clear that all human behavior is ultimately just a product of neurons firing at each other and ultimately controlling muscles that ultimately constitute our behavior? Is that good? Is that bad? If the soul is out of a job? Well, some people obviously would think that's terrible, that the worst thing we could find out is that we don't have souls. But it could also be a wonderful thing. The thought is that belief in souls can do a lot of damage. Perhaps the most extreme example, we'll take the events of 9/11. People who carried out those hijackings, they believed that their bodies were going to die, but they believed that their souls were going to go on to live a very pleasant existence. Could they have been brought to do that if it weren't for the belief that their souls were participating in a higher purpose?
Green and Cohen's work is in its infancy, but the early results point toward a future in which science may confront our notion of evil with reason. In a neuroscience lab, far from the heated rhetoric of religion and politics.
Tyler, can you hear me?
What is evil? And how do we react to evil? How do we respond to evil?
By the time news of Dahmer's controversial baptism had spread, Ratcliffe realized that he had misread his own congregation.
Did I ever get the sense people thought of me as a collaborator with evil? No one ever said anything like that to me, to my face, in fact, and this perhaps speaks of the hypocrisy of people.
Ratcliffe claims half of his congregation left in objection to the Dahmer baptism.
One of my favorite passages in the Bible is about evil, rather than try to explain it. You rise up to bring aid and comfort to the person who's hurting.
The regrets I have is that people have not responded as I had thought they would. My regret is perhaps misreading people and not seeing what was going on in their hearts, but no regrets in terms of what I did or what I was trying to do.
6 months after his baptism, Jeffrey Dahmer was murdered by a fellow inmate.
I believe Jeff is in heaven. If it takes faith in Jesus to go to heaven, Jeff had that.
All together we stand and sing our song.
I am a sheep and the Lord is my shepherd, watching over my soul.
My argument simply is that the human mind has an infinite capacity to make us kind or cruel, caring or indifferent, selfish or generous, and to make some of us villains and make others of us heroes. And that's the wonderful thing about the human mind.
Zimbardo believes that ordinary people are not only capable of infinite cruelty, but that we are all equally capable of great good.
As we try to understand what makes people do evil deeds, what's really critical is not only to hold up a mirror to human nature, it's hold up a mirror to ourselves.